Hi everyone, my name is Daniela Siggia and I'm Vice President of Development for Textile Waste Diversion, and today we're going to talk about how social responsibility presents in my sector. Now, you would think that because we're involved in household waste, which is the textile portion of household waste, so your old clothes, linens and stuff, that you're probably assuming I'm talking about not sending the stuff I collect to landfill. I can confidently tell you that even the least integral participant in the sector has an astounding 95% diversion rate. And this is something the sector has perfected a long time ago. So being socially responsible in this sector is taking things a step further than that, because we're already at an amazing diversion rate. It can't get better. Some of us are actually at a 98% diversion rate. And that's because by sending something to a landfill, we're not generating revenue from it. So the only way for collectors to generate revenue is to find value-added uses for this textile, so to sell it either to the local secondhand market or export it abroad, or maybe industrial applications it may be sold for. Even your fabric scraps are sold to cat toy manufacturers, for example. So we try to sell every single thing that we collect, and we do a really good job at that. But there's aspects of the sector where the sector has slacked off for the last 20 years, and as a result of even sometimes lobbying, we're actually 25 years behind the times compared to Europe, especially with new green technology. And many charities or reclamation companies that are currently collecting used clothing, they like to use the word recycling. We're recycling, you're recycling, when the fact is that in Canada there is no textile recycling. And whatever it is might be, a fashion designer by themselves doing something, but actually putting textiles in a machine and it comes out the other end as something else, like is done in Europe, does not happen here, and that word is used in a misleading way. And what that's caused is that the average Canadian believes we recycle. The average Canadian politician believes that we recycle. So because they think it's existing, they don't think it needs to exist. And therefore, everything has operated the same for a very, very, very long time. And that has served a few players that have almost dominated the sector to it being somewhat of a hidden monopoly. Not quite a monopoly, but they're, the really big players in the sector, when you compare like their yearly sales, would go from 600 million to 5 million. So we're talking some really big fish in this pond, and they dominate things like East African export. If you want to do some further research, look at how North American used clothing has decimated the economy in East Africa, because it decimated their garment sector, which had a huge multiplication factor. So it was complete economic devastation, that ripple effect, and Canadian clothing is part of that. We did that. And that's because some of these huge $600 million companies that exist that are Canadian or not, North American companies too, but North American companies dominate that East African thing. So we don't hear about that here. We don't see those headlines here. Unless you actively seek them. And also many of these companies hide behind several charities. So what you think is a diverse industry of many charities that collect used clothing, not all of them, but some of them sell to that same, big entity. So it's actually not a true diversity. So part of social responsibility for textile waste diversion was to see that and give the consumer a different option. So therefore, we created the platform that with our infrastructure, any individual person or any charity that otherwise would not be able to afford the infrastructure to collect used clothing for fundraising, because it's a very expensive endeavor to, become engaged in, we give that, we take care of that. So therefore, any person, one person or a big organization, can use TWD to fundraise with textiles. Now that has created a true diversity in the sector, because now it's free to everybody. Everybody can profit from South Ontario's used clothing. So that's something we're very proud of. And then there's also the choice to build new trade routes for things that we do have to export. Instead of sending it to East Africa, we really try and build a lot of relationships in South America where our clothing does not have that negative impact. Instead, it's the opposite. It's a low entry point to entrepreneurism there, so it's lifted thousands of people from poverty. So these are the kind of ways that a brand can be socially responsible over and above what they're doing with their textiles. And then I can also use my brand to leverage messages that don't necessarily, help my collections. So for example, me talking about unsustainable laundry practices, that does not help me. I don't get more clothes because I have those messages. But what it does do is it educates the consumer on and empowers them. So I'm proud of that, and I'm happy to use my business platform as a platform for educating the public. Another cause that I champion personally is that of chemical bans. In Europe, well over 1,000, maybe over 2,000 chemicals are banned all across Europe. Many of those chemicals are used in textile applications. In Canada, we only have, I think, 23 to 28 chemicals banned. In the United States, it's 8, which means these big companies only have North America, that are willing to spend the kind of money that North American consumers spend on toxic cleaning products, toxic applications in your clothes, toxic legislation that forces some of these chemicals to be in your clothes, and big money lobbyists keep that message from getting out there. And they keep the legislation that exists in Europe happening in Canada, which means that Canadians are inundated with carcinogenic and endocrine impeding chemicals every single day in our clothes that touch our skin, which is our largest, absorbent organ. It's, and for me, both my parents have cancer, so for me, this is personal. So I am happy to leverage the brand to get that message out, even though it won't generate more clothes for me. And that's socially responsible. And then there's the obvious. This is a globally traded commodity, and the proceeds that are earned from the export and the trade and whatever of that commodity can be used to fund, and this is what TWD does, partnerships with post-secondary institutions, not just one but several, on research and technology applications that could advance the sector. We sponsor things like waterway cleanups and community festivals and anything that we can do to support programs that tackle food insecurity or pollinator support. These are all ways that we can give back to the communities that support us. And social responsibility, there's so many ways to participate in helping the world be better. And I think as a business, it's just the right thing to do. Have a great day, everybody.